But welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Katie Kapler. I am Katie Kapler. I am co-founder and CEO of InScribe, and I'm going to be leading our discussion today around student belonging and the ways in which virtual spaces and virtual communities can help foster that sense of belonging, especially for non-traditional students. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. I am joined today by my colleague Danielle Bonner, who is going to be helping moderate with me. She'll be keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A. So we absolutely would love for this to be more of a conversation than a presentation. So we welcome any feedback, questions, observations, just put them in the chat along the way. We're pretty good at kind of stopping as we go and incorporating those into the conversation, but definitely let us know. I also want to introduce, some of you probably have met Fred Scott, who is the director of our sales organization. He's not joining us today, but if you have not heard from him, you might hear from him another time. So we just wanted to introduce him so you know who he is, in case you hear from him or have already had a great conversation with him. I did want to let you know that we are recording the webinar, which everybody already, I always say that, but I think Zoom tells you that on the way in. So we will share that recording. That's what I probably should say after the session today. So you'll have that. You can share that with colleagues or rewatch the highlights. And with that, so you know who we are, we would love to know you as well. So if you have a minute to just introduce yourself in the chat feature, would love to know who you are, what institution or organization you're with, your role there. And as I always say, if there's something in particular that you want to get, that brought you here today, something that you're curious about or a project that you're working on within your workspace, let us know, because I definitely want to incorporate that into our discussion, make sure that we touch on anything that's relevant to you and what you're focused on. So while we're doing that, I'm going to talk a little bit about why this topic is, I think, top of mind for us, at least, as well as probably some of the people attending. I think student belonging is an area that institutions and organizations have thought a lot about over the years. Certainly COVID and the isolation that a lot of students were feeling at that time really heightened that questions around that area and brought to the surface maybe the ways in which students for many years, especially students who were learning online, had been feeling a sense of isolation, and maybe that hadn't been tended to in quite the way that we thought we were tending to it. The focus on belonging and student connectedness and this understanding of how those things really relate to other measures like student success and persistence and the ability for a student to really maintain the confidence and focus that they need to succeed. So any way that we can continue to bring that into the students' experience and the positive impacts they can have, I think, is something we're all thinking about. And that's what we're going to really talk about today. Some very simple, in fact, low-cost things that we can do that has a huge impact on some of these measures of belonging. I'm going to jump into this, but I'll pause. Danielle, anything you want me to be aware of from the chat? Also, apparently I can't see the chat for some reason. I don't know, where Zoom's being a bit silly. So Danielle, is there anything in the chat you want me to be especially aware of as we jump into this conversation?
So we have some people looking to learn more about building community for students, and you've come to the right place, Lawrence. As well as, again, like belonging, persistence, retention, and how do digital communities help with those topics?
Awesome. Well, then, yes, I think all of those things are things that we'll talk about today. So I just want to touch a little bit on why community in general matters and start to touch on that intersection between community and belonging. I think this is a conversation that is more obvious when we're thinking about our in-person students, particularly in-person students who are living on campus. So their community is almost baked into their experience. They can join clubs and they can go to the library and they run into their classmates after class and on the way, to get food. And so these opportunities for sort of casual interaction, low stakes conversation are happening all the time for these learners. And although we still do want to be intentional about building community and connection among that set of students, it can happen organically for them a little bit more easily. When we start to think about our online students or our students who are maybe commuting to campus and don't have the luxury of being there in that space for a long time, then we have to think about how do we craft these experiences more intentionally for that set of individuals. And we know that a larger and larger number of our learners are learning in that way. They're taking their classes virtually, they're coming to and from campus. And so the population of people who fall into this category is getting bigger all the time. We also know that those students are super busy. So while we would think, well, why don't we design some synchronous events for them to attend? Let's do some team building activities. And although those are valuable, we also know it can be very difficult for this population of students to attend those events. So I don't know how many folks in the audience have organized, an orientation session that's live or a special guest speaker, and then, you don't get the turnout that you were looking for. And that's probably not because your students weren't interested. It might just be because they were working at that time or something came up with their kids or, some other thing prevented them from being there in that moment. So the idea that the way that we go about this has to keep in mind that area of flexibility, on demand, let me meet you where you are, is a really key element. Now, we know that connectedness can be missing in online. So there's lots of studies and statistics out here. One that we reference is just the vast majority of students learning online do not feel particularly connected to their peers. And in many cases have no interaction with their peers outside of what they might be prescribed to do as part of their coursework. We also know that establishing those connections and building that sense of belonging will have a positive impact on their ability to persist. So we could say well, why do we even care about this? Well, if we want our students to be successful, not just in their learning, but even after they've left college or university, the lifelong impacts of that confidence building exercise is valuable, and particularly valuable for some of our most vulnerable students who come from these underserved populations.
You're talking about the confidence building aspect, right? And we have a comment here in the chat, and somebody is mentioning that they just really want their students to feel like they can be themselves on campus, right? So not that they have to conform to a certain idea. And so that confidence in coming to these digital spaces really does help them find those people, right? Because sometimes it can be hard to find people in the hallways. Maybe you have somebody that's a little bit more shy that doesn't want to have those conversations in the hallways or in the classroom. So that comment just came in through the chat there.
I mean, I think that's a great point. I've certainly been emphasizing the non-traditional student population, but what you say is so true, Danielle, which is even in the students who are on campus, not everybody has the confidence or the personality to kind of put themselves out there and be part of those community groups. So when we talk about flexibility and on demand and meeting students where they are, that also extends to that population of people who are just shy. And when you're interacting in a virtual space, you have more time to think about what is it that I want to say? How do I want to construct myself? I can reach a broader number of students than I might be if I was just in my dorm. So there's value for that population of learners as well, certainly. Thank you for that. And that's, feeds right into this conversation. So when we talk to students and when we're constructing these spaces, we at any time we can, we incorporate the students from the institution into that process. And when we talk to them, the main things that they tell us is, that flexibility is always very high on the list, anytime, anywhere. They also say simplicity is key. So I don't want to have to go hunting for this place. It can't be a separate system that I have to remember where to go. I just want it to be in one location, super easy to access anytime I need it. And then they use this word a lot, authentic. So when I go in there, I want to be able to bring my authentic self. I want to know that other people are in there being authentic, bringing their best selves to the table. And I want to talk about the stuff that I want to talk about, right? I'm a student. I have particular things that I'm thinking about or worrying about or excited about. And I want to have the freedom in this space to have those conversations. And if we provide these three, sort of this trifecta for students, is when we see these communities really thrive. Of course, we balance that with what institutions want and need. And we all want more of our students to be able to be successful. And so aligning, like if I provide the space that you're looking for, I will get that better sense of belonging and satisfaction and persistence. But we also know the institution wants to be able to understand how to better serve their students. So it's not just about letting them be in there helping themselves, but what can I learn from the conversations that are taking place in my community to maybe make changes to how I support them in other parts of my organization, so that those insights are really key. And then, the reality is people at the institution are also very busy. So your faculty, your staff, they have a lot going on. So it's always important to us that when the community comes into play, it's also improving the efficiency of the institution. So if students are helping each other, if we're crowdsourcing answers, if we're sharing answers to a question with many, many people instead of just one individual, all of a sudden you're taking, the 200 or 400 questions that students might have need help, and you're pulling that down to a smaller set of maybe 10 to 20. So the individuals at the institution who are primarily supporting these students find that they gain a lot of time back in their day, because instead, again, of answering the question 100 times, I'm answering it once, or a student is helping another student, and I don't have to always be the one stepping in. So that community-based many-to-many model is really also designed around the efficiency piece. So let me pause there. There's a lot of upfront information. I want to dive into the demo, but I want to see, Danielle, if we had any questions or comments from the audience.
Yeah, we have a question about connecting international students as well. And I shared that international students love the 24-hour support, especially when you're in different time zones. However, I also shared that you would share some examples with us.
Yes, so many of the programs that we work with have students that are participating from around the world. And I think part of that, Danielle, you hit the nail on the head, which is when you have literally 24 time zones of students, it becomes impossible for the institution to staff to support that effectively. And so the added benefit you get of people participating at all those different times is there's generally always somebody available to help somebody else. And students are very excited to jump in and help each other in our communities, we find. We also, I think the other thing that people love about these communities is you get to meet people that you might not have met otherwise. And so just connecting, with somebody around the world and learning about what their world is like and how it's different than mine, and that sort of curiosity just about the humans that I go to school with also benefits people greatly. But I'd be curious, if you want to follow up and let us know what your international student population looks like, or if there's a particular thing that you think that they're missing that you want to bring into the equation. One of the schools that we work with, BYU Idaho, they use their InScribe communities to facilitate academic support and tutoring. They have two tutors that are on staff, but they're only available, 8 to 5. And so by opening up this community model, what they found was, I think it was 80% of the questions that they got in their communities were answered by a fellow student before the tutor could even get in and get to them. And sometimes that's because it was late at night, and sometimes that's just because students were really fast at getting in there and helping each other. So you're really building almost like an army of TAs is what they describe it as, to come in and help fellow students.
Wonderful. Yeah, I will go ahead and drop that case study in the chat, but let's go ahead and dig into the demo.
Awesome. So high level, we're going to jump into the demo, but really, when we talk about a peer community or virtual community, it's really just a virtual space where students can come together, ask questions, solve problems, provide support. And then all of those interactions are stored in a knowledge repository. So we talked about that idea of reusability of content. If a question has been asked and answered, we want to make sure the next person can find that answer right away, and they don't have to ask that question again. It's also a great way to connect students based on their affiliations or their affinities. So you'll see you can create sort of subgroups in the community where people that share common background and interests can connect with each other to talk about sort of their unique challenges and the things that they're really focused on and thinking about. The communities, so if you have the Rio study handy, Danielle, just before we jump into the demo, we did a really great research study with Rio Salado College down in Arizona. in partnership with the College Innovation Network, where we studied the impact of the communities on Rio's student population, a large number of which are on campus and online. So they have kind of two sides of that coin. And we found that you can see from this slide, students who were active in the community reported a much higher sense of belonging and peer connectedness. But that wasn't just self-selecting, because we also demonstrated that the participation in the community actually caused that sense of belonging measure to increase significantly after just 6 weeks. So we did a point in time study, at the start, and then we asked them again in 6 weeks, and there was a huge increase in their reported sense of belonging. So you can see that the impacts are real, and they don't take a lot of time. You don't have to do this for a whole semester or a whole year to start to see those benefits. We also see that student satisfaction measures go up. So maybe you use Net Promoter on your campus or something else, but a huge jump in how a student's perception of value for the institution and the processes they go through at that institution. But at the same time, again, decreasing the amount of time support teams are spending answering individual questions, monitoring individual student needs. So this sort of trifecta, improving outcomes and belonging, decreasing the cost of support for the institution. I saw something pop in the chat. Is there something you want to touch on, or is that you putting the?
That was me putting the links to both the BYU Idaho case study and the Rio Salado case study.
Awesome. I'm going to come back to this page here in a second. So let's jump into the demo. So just to orient us, we're in the InScribe organization and the Students Connect community. I'm going to demo this kind of standalone, but InScribe is really designed for integration. So what I mean by that is we want the community to be where the students already are. So maybe that's your learning management system. Maybe that's your website, your portal. Maybe it's all three. We also recently launched a mobile app, but it's very important that the community does not sit to the side and is something that students have to go looking for. It should always be one click away when a student needs it and easy to find. So I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. And then it's not uncommon for an institution to have more than one type of community on campus. So in this case, I might have an accounting community that I'm part of, maybe that student community that I was in. So I might have communities around academics and learning, communities that are just around social conversation. We're going to really focus on that sort of social peer-to-peer use case right now. So you can see that the majority of the community is organized by topic area. Depending on the type of community they're building, we know what topics tend to resonate with students, and so we can bring kind of a template to the table if we work with you, but these are all totally customizable. So you would adjust your topics to reflect what you know that your students are thinking about and talking about, and sort of the language of your institution. And then you also have the ability to create channels. So these are those subgroups inside your community where you can reflect back the different interests or experiences that your students might have. And students can browse these channels, they can join the ones that they think are relevant to them, and then they can find that subset of students that kind of share the same backgrounds and unique challenges that they might be thinking about as well. When you come into the community, a lot of times there's sort of two main reasons that students come into our community. One is that they just have a problem and they need help. So I'm stuck on, I can't find a textbook for my math class, or I'm, can't figure out how to, register for classes next term. So they'll come in with that question in mind. Other times students are really just coming in looking for that human connection. So maybe they found something interesting they wanted to share, or they're just looking for people who are also 46 and returning to school for the first time. So those more sort of social human connection type posts. When students come in and they really just need help, what they'll often do is search the community to see if they can find something related. So, maybe I'm trying to figure out if I want to take classes this summer. I can see somebody else already started this conversation. There was some input put into it. So again, it's possible that if my question's already been answered, I can find that solution and jump on right away. So I got an answer as quickly as possible, and that's one less question that the community or the support team needs to answer for me. But that might not be what I'm here for. Maybe my question hasn't been answered. And so students can jump in to start a new conversation. When you start a new conversation, you can pick a particular topic that you want to tag it to, pick a particular channel. But you'll notice that as I start to type out the question, the system is still going to maybe recommend to me some solutions. So if I, maybe bypass the search process and I start to type out, this is Rosie, and she's the technology assistant that lives in our communities and does a couple of things to keep them healthy and happy. And one of the things is providing these recommendations. So here's content that I think would be valuable to you or help you. And I'm going to just push that to you as part of this process. So not super invasive, but again, just trying to be helpful and trying to get you to solution quickly. But we'll pretend that doesn't help me. So I'm going to ask a new question. And then we can bring in images, videos, links, a number of things to make my post even richer. I can tag it to one or more topics. And then I can decide how I want my post to be shared. So this is also part of that idea of we want people to be able to participate in their community the way that makes them most comfortable. And so I could share my post with all members of the community. I could post it anonymously, so everyone can see it, but they wouldn't know that I was the one that posted it. Or I can post privately to just the moderator. So maybe the moderators of your community are your maybe some coaches or advisors or other staff members who are keeping an eye on things. This is a great way to encourage those shy students to participate. So just the idea of it being asynchronous widens the bucket of who will participate, and then giving them this agency over who can see who they are widens that bucket even further. And you'll start to see a lot of people participate who maybe would never be the one to raise their hand in class or speak up in a live session.
So we have a couple of questions.
Yeah, please.
Can you share some strategies on how to promote and communicate the communities to motivate students to interact?
Yeah, so there's some really practical things that we can do, and then some more social things. So from a practical standpoint, one thing you can do is just preload all your students into the community. So nobody would know they're a member. And if they choose never to come into the community, their account would never get fully activated. But by preloading them, it does start to generate notifications to them about what's happening in the community. So if Katie came in and posted this question about summer term, those members would get the notification, which I'll talk about in a second. And it's a way to draw people in because now they're seeing, what's going on in this community. I can see that it has value to me and I'm encouraged to go in and participate. So it's kind of a really practical thing. The other is just making sure that the students understand that the space is there, how to access it, and that it's their space. And so we have a kind of a communication toolkit, I'll call it, that we provide to our partners. And it's generally a combination of announcements, maybe an email campaign, and a placement of the community somewhere that students are already going. So whether that's on the portal or on the homepage of the LMS or within a particular LMS class that you're using. So it's easy for students to find it and discover it as well. So those two things in combination are really useful for getting the community kicked off and getting the momentum going. Once people are in the community, we can really capitalize on that notification system to continue to build momentum. We do not want to rely on, we don't expect people to be hanging out in their InScribe community 24/7, just waiting for something to happen, right? So as soon as a conversation gets started, the system pushes out a set of notifications. The notifications go out in two ways. One is through email, and one is through the mobile app. So students can download the app and then get notifications right on their screen. Those notifications are all customizable. So you can see some of the sort of details of what the notifications, how the notifications are generated. And students can decide, do I want to know right away? Do I want a summary at the end of the day? Or do I want to snooze this notification, no longer receive it? So each individual student can control how chatty, the community is in terms of reaching out to them, which is a really nice feature to keep so that they don't feel like they're being bombarded, but that they can get the things that are really relevant and important to them. Did I see
So
something?
you may have answered this question, but I just want to make sure that we cover it. Would moderators be able to see who the anonymous students are to avoid negative interactions?
Yes. So I'm not that, thank you for asking that. Anonymous means anonymous to my peers, but not to the moderators. So the moderators could always click through to see who that individual is. And it does tell the person when they're posting, if, you know, in the description that's the case. So it's, you know, it's upfront about that as part of the process. We do also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we also have a couple of, because you brought up the idea of, you know, negative posts, or what if somebody says something unkind, or, you know, in the community. So the first thing I will say is like that I don't think we have an example of students ever being unkind to each other in our communities, which I know sounds insane, and it's very like nobody ever believes me when I tell you that, but it's true. And it's and why that is the case, I think, you know, we haven't studied it specifically, but I think it's a combination of the lack of anonymity. So unlike a social space like Facebook or Discourse, or places where, you know, you can have a different, you know, you might be able to hide your identity a little bit more. We don't do that in our platform. And then the other is that it's because it's integrated into my educational tool set. I think students bring that mindset to the community. Like I'm here in almost like a professional capacity, or I'm bringing my learning self to this space. Whereas maybe I behave differently in some of these outside social tools. And so my personality there is just a little bit different. But whatever the case, we don't see it. However, with that said, we do have some tools built into the platform to protect against that if something were to come up. So, and there's kind of two ways that works. What am I looking for? So one is if we have a set of keywords, and if one of those keywords ever shows up in a post, Rosie, that little technology assistant, will escalate that to one of the moderator or to your moderators. And that list is customizable. You can put what you want in there. We also run all the conversations through a sentiment API to measure the emotion. And so if the emotion of a post is particularly upset, sad, angry, the system can also proactively identify that and escalate it. So this flag from Rosie, the student would not see that, only the moderator would see that. But it's a way for you as a moderator to know, oh, hey, there's like, this probably needs more immediate attention, or maybe this is a student that I should just reach out to. Now, if you felt like that post was not appropriate to be viewed by the entire community, you could also modify it. You probably wouldn't go ahead and delete the post, but you could move it into this moderator only status. So now it's just a private conversation between you and that student, and other students wouldn't see that. So those are just a couple of tools that we have in place, just in case, you know, you want to keep an eye and you can't be there all the time to monitor every single thing that's happening.
All right, one more quick question. So do we see a difference between the type of engagement or level of engagement in terms of students who are younger versus older or returning students?
We have not seen a difference in participation across age groups, with the one exception being that we have a middle school community and those kids are like very, very chatty. But in terms of post-secondary, we have communities where where people are mostly in their 20s. The Rio Salado case study or research study I referenced, the average age was actually 56 years old. At Fort Hays State University, where we work, the average age is about 36. So across the age groups, we actually don't see a big difference in the frequency of participation, or even really in the types of conversations. We still have those same two buckets of I need help, or I'm looking for connection and reassurance. There was a second part to that question that I thought I might have a different answer to, but now I can't remember what it was.
So there's the different types and then the level of engagement.
Yeah, there was age, across ages.
Age or returning students?
Oh, returning students. Yeah, so again, in our work with Arizona State University, a lot of those are, I think some of those are returning students, but a lot of them are students who are continuing through their learning either on ground or online, versus Fort Hays and Rio, which is a lot of returning students, obviously from the age that that's indicative. But those are students who took time off and are coming back. So I think we would have thought that maybe with returning students or older students, there would be a lower participation rate, but they actually seem to be one of the populations where that reassurance piece is very high. You know, I'm coming back, I'm 46, I haven't done math in however many years. Is this really the right decision for me? I mean, we see those posts all the time. And the number of students that fellow students who jump in to provide reassurance or me too is, you know, heartwarming, obviously, but we also see that that level of sort of reinforcement all the time as well.
I am loving all the questions coming in. So we have 2 more questions.
Yeah, please.
Do members have the ability to filter what they see in the channel?
So inside a channel, you can filter to individual topics. And you can filter to like read and unread, or, you know, things that don't have a response that might need a response. Curious what other filters they were thinking about.
Well, I'll just ask this person to follow up if you have any questions on that. And then this next question I love because it comes up and it's a really great use case. Can alumni participate in the platform, or is it strictly for current students?
No, that is a great question. Alumni are more than welcome, and we have a lot of institutions right now who are thinking about that. One of my favorite stories is we started a community of students, and so it initially started with just students, but because the communities persist over time, as the students graduated and became alumni, they still had access to the community. And we sort of went back and looked a couple of years later. And so they didn't intentionally include alumni, but alumni became members of the community over time. And I think it was like 50% of the responses that we were seeing in there were actually coming from alumni as well. So we learned what great active members of the community they can be. And so now we have a lot more institutions intentionally including alumni, you know, proactively in that process. Yeah, I mean, we just hear from alumni, maybe I don't have money to give back to my school, or, you know, I don't have time to be a dedicated mentor to a student, but I would love to jump in and provide advice about this job that I got or my experience going to work for this company. So it's a great idea.
More questions are coming in. I'm loving the engagement today. So is it possible to use InScribe for certain segments of students instead of the entire population? You talked about channels a little bit, but explain that to us a little bit more.
Yes. Yeah. And a lot of institutions will start that way. So maybe an individual college or program, you know, you'll start there before spreading it across, I should say before, as a starting place, and then maybe later expand it to the broader student population. I mean, communities are the more the merrier. So the bigger the population, the more interaction you'll see, but it's not uncommon to start with a subset of learners.
And then what type of support does InScribe provide for training and implementation?
We are a very hands-on partner sometimes. But yes, so implementation is pretty simple. It's the technical implementation, LTI, generally LTI and SSO, although we can adjust that depending on the use case. We'll do virtual training for you and for your moderators. We have a ton also of material. So we'll do like a live virtual training, but then we also have a support community that's dedicated just to moderators and administrators of our institutions where you can engage with us. We host webinars and workshops every month where people can come, learn about features, go deep on a particular thing, learn what other institutions are doing. And then we have ongoing weekly or bi-weekly check-ins where we look at the community, we talk about what's working, where we want to make adjustments, and then whether you want to, you know, do you want to expand the community to additional users? Are there other use cases that might be useful? And those conversations for us will continue until you feel like you don't want to talk to us anymore. And then from an ongoing support standpoint, you know, you can email us, you can ask us questions to our support community, or we can talk about things in those weekly meetings. And I joke about that, but those meetings are also very important for us. We are very customer driven from a roadmap and planning perspective. So a lot of our ideas for new features and extensions of features come from the conversations we're having with you. So we find those incredibly valuable.
So the next two questions go hand in hand together. I see that you can have a profile picture there and everyone wants to know who they're talking to, but is there the ability to create like a bio or a profile? And then in addition to that, because you're going into this area, the other question is in regards to a reward system of some sort. How are we encouraging students to participate? And is that done through rewards?
Yes, well, this is a great page to touch on. So this is our profile page, and you can see here that I can go in, I can edit my profile picture, I can put in a little information about myself. I've linked in a couple of my social accounts as well, so people can find me in those systems. I will say this little box here is only visible to moderators, so we do not share email addresses with other participants in the community. We are working on a feature that would allow students to share more or maybe message each other directly in the platform. But for now, just know that this information is private to the moderators. And then you can see what I've been up to in the community, where I've been participating, where I've been contributing. And this is also will show you our reputation system that's built in. So I have not been a very active participant, but we break down the reputation across these three areas. What conversations am I initiating? What has been the impact of my conversations? Where else am I contributing? And then what content am I consuming? This is important because we always want to emphasize participants in a community who are consuming content, but maybe not posting a lot or ever, are important active members of your community. They are providing reinforcement for the people that do contribute. They are getting a lot out of the content that they're consuming. And so, I think sometimes people think everyone has to post for it to work. So, I think a lot of people are, no, that's not true. You're going to have a large population of those lurkers, but that's good and that's healthy. And that is a format of a healthy community. These are, students love these, or participants love these. They get email notifications as they level up in the community. We'll also be doing some work to kind of extend this profile system where we can see not just, where you were active, but which particular topics were you active in. And then as new questions come in, we can start to direct those to the people who are most likely to respond. Instead of just saying to everybody, come in and respond, I could say, oh, Katie, this is a topic you talk about a lot. I think you'd be extra valuable in responding to this. Did I get it all?
Just a quick time check here. We have about 5 minutes. And so I would just encourage everyone to drop their questions into the chat so that we can try and answer them live. I know there's a ton of other really wonderful features that we're not going to dig into today, but Katie, just again, quick time check.
Thank you. I know I'm not used to the 45 versus the hour, even though I was the one that said we should do that. So I'm going to touch on a couple of things really quickly then. So we talked a lot about the conversation space. That's where conversations are being started. We have a small resources area. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but just know that you can put supplemental videos and content and articles in the community as well. One of the things I am really excited about is our live sessions feature. So the platform is really designed to be asynchronous, but if you are offering synchronous events, you can share them in the InScribe community. So in this case, we're going to have a Sunday social. You have a little description. People can jump in and ask questions ahead of the live event, or if they miss the event, put your recording here, and then people can come in later, watch that recording, ask follow-up questions. We hear all the time from institutions that just by publishing their live events in the community, their attendance goes up more than 100%. So many, many people join because they get the notification when the event is published, and they get another notification that it's starting right before it happens. And they can click right through that notification on their phone to jump in and join. So if you're doing live events and people aren't joining you, think about publishing them in this way, and it helps a lot.
Just a quick comment on that, Katie. I know some of our attendees today actually joined from that feature. And then the additional comment that I have is that students aren't necessarily creating those live events, correct? That's just moderators.
Yes, not yet, although we are talking about the potential to open up that live session for students as well. So that would be an option in your community potentially. And then just in like 2 minutes, I'll show you a couple of the integration opportunities. So if we were to integrate your community into the LMS, usually those are communities that are more focused around academics and learning, although sometimes people will post a social community in the orientation course or something like that. Usually you have it in the left-hand nav. I only bring up this integration point to show you our embedded homepage. So in this case, the InScribe community launches right in the LMS window and keeps them here, but you can really do all the things that you would do in the main community right from here. You can also add it as a content item within a module if you wanted to. So LMS integration, super easy to do. You can also integrate it into your website if you have students come into a website for a lot of reasons. This is an example from Indiana State University where they integrated their medical student community here. This is just basic HTML, but it can then launch them over to the InScribe community where they can see the content that's interesting and relevant to them. They could search the community directly from here. We also we've done integrations with student portals. We've done integrations with courseware products from publishers. So again, our philosophy is to meet the students where they are. So you tell us where your students are likely to be, and we can build additional integration points if we haven't done it already. That really also plays into this mobile strategy. So we launched our mobile app recently, and that way your users can really just have their community in their back pocket. And we've seen big uptick in participation through the notifications that come through on the mobile app as well. Any last questions?
The last question we had was, will today's session be recorded and sent out to attendees? And the answer is yes. Please look for an email from our Director of Sales, Fred Scott, and he'll be sharing the recording with everyone.
Awesome. So just to wrap up really quickly, thank you all for joining. And I did want to let you know about an upcoming webinar that we have. So I don't know if any of you heard, we announced today a new partnership that we have with Lumen Learning. If you guys aren't familiar with them, they're a wonderful organization that builds courseware products using OER resources. So really low cost, high value digital courseware for students. We are going to be integrated into their next generation platform. So we'll create peer support and learning communities around their curriculum. We're going to be talking about that partnership and how academics and learning and virtual communities work together to support students in their learning journey. That is next Wednesday wow, that's a lot of times, 11 a.m. Mountain Time. So pick your time zone. But I think Danielle will drop that link into the chat now, and we would love to have you join us there as well.
The link is in the chat. And then Katie, there is one more question. Do you want to wrap up here and then we can answer that question?
Sure. So this is my info. Please reach out, find me on LinkedIn. Would love to talk to you. And again, yeah, Fred and or I will be following up. So this is something you're thinking about, let us know. We've got, lots of resources to help you accomplish similar goals on your campus.
Awesome. So jumping back to the website integration, when InScribe is integrated into the website, does this mean that the community is public? And do I need to be a member to participate?
That's up to you. So in the case of IU, they decided to make their community public, which means you can look at all of the content and browse. But if you want to participate, you have to create an account and log in. You can also, though, have everything still be private. So when I would click this link, what I would get is a login box, and then I would be asked to log in from there. Most institutions, we use their central authentication system. So the login box that would pop up would be an IU login. I would enter my IU credentials and I would get in. We do have the option to use social login. So if you want to make your community more open and kind of allow anybody to come to it and join, you could add things like login with LinkedIn, login with Google, and then you're opening up access outside of your institution. But again, that is totally up to you. You can have full control over who's in and who's out.
Wonderful. Well, I just dropped a couple of additional links in the chat. If you want to connect with Katie on LinkedIn, that link is in there. And then we'd love to talk with you. So there's a link in there if you'd like to schedule a conversation.
Thanks, everybody, for your time today. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thanks, Katie.